3 years ago, you were grading papers on a Tuesday night, history teacher. Portland, $54,000 a year. You had a coffee shop 2 blocks from your apartment. The barista knew your name, your order, your mood. You drove a 2008 Camry with a cracked dashboard. The heater only worked on the driver's side. You were fine with that. Then the crypto position you'd held for 4 years. The one your colleagues laughed about. The one they called your fun money mistake. Moved and kept moving and didn't stop. Your net worth is now $1.2 trillion. Not rich, not wealthy, not even billionaire fits anymore. We don't have a word for what you are. Your net worth exceeds the GDP of the Netherlands. You are worth more than 4 Elon Musks, combined. Every professional sports franchise in North America, every stadium, every jersey, every player contract. You could buy all of it and still have change. If you spent $1 million every single day, starting right now, you would run out of money in the year 4300, and everyone knows, not celebrity knows. Something older than that. Something with no name yet. Governments are calling your personal number. People stand outside your building not for an autograph, but because they need to be near whatever you now represent. Your face is on every screen in every country simultaneously. You need security, not a bodyguard, a team. 12 minimum rotating shifts, former military, armed, the kind of protection reserved for sitting heads of state. You make one call. 48 hours later, it's done. But then the apartment is a problem. The address has been photographed from 17 angles and posted across the internet. The building manager is getting hundreds of calls a day. So you buy a property. 14 acres behind a wall you can't see over from the street. A guardhouse staffed around the clock. You can't even see the main house from the gate. $180 million. Your accountant doesn't flag it. It's a rounding error. But a property like that doesn't run itself. You need staff. A housekeeper, a groundskeeper, 2 chefs on rotating shifts, an estate manager, a security director, an entire IT team just for the surveillance infrastructure, a personal assistant who has her own assistant. Within 6 weeks, 61 people work at your house. You are safe. You are comfortable. Everything runs like a machine. So you start spending. You buy a plane, not a charter, a Boeing 747, gutted and rebuilt as a flying apartment. $380 million. You buy an island in the Maldives. You commission the largest private yacht ever constructed, helipad, submarine bay, full medical suite, cinema. $580 million. And here's what nobody tells you. Your wealth grows faster than you can spend it. Even parked in the most boring financial instruments on earth, your net worth increases by tens of millions of dollars every single day. You wake up richer than you went to sleep. Without deciding anything. Without doing anything. Money is handled. Security is handled. Property, staff, transport, all handled. All you want is a cup of coffee. Pot 2. The things you can't buy back. You call ahead. The security team needs 45 minutes of lead time for any public appearance. When you finally get there, the room goes quiet when you walk in. The barista's hands are shaking. Someone at a corner table is filming you over the top of a laptop. You get the coffee. It tastes exactly the same. But the chair feels different. The room feels different. Every single person in it is either pretending not to look at you or not bothering to pretend. You leave after 4 minutes. You don't go back. You write a check next. $800 million to a global hunger initiative, the largest single charitable donation in recorded human history. The news cycle covers it for about 11 hours because people do the math. Against what you have, $800 million is 3 weeks of passive returns. And once they understand that, they want more. They always want more. You can give until the number doesn't move, and it still won't be enough, because the number never stops moving. So you stop writing checks, not because you stopped caring, because there is no amount that resolves anything. The friends are harder, not because they leave, because they stay, but differently. Your college roommate Marcus flies out to visit. He was the person who argued with you about everything, films, politics, whose turn it was to do the dishes. That was the friendship. 2 people who didn't agree, grinding against each other. Alive because of the friction. He arrives and compliments the house. Compliments the grounds. Compliments the wine at dinner without knowing anything about wine. He agrees with everything you say for 2 days straight. He laughs at things that aren't funny. On the second evening, you make a deliberately bad point, just to see what happens. He nods, thoughtfully. You watch him leave from the upstairs window. Same person. All the edges filed down, the others stop calling at their own pace. Some slowly, some all at once. The ones who still call have a new quality in their voice. Careful, measured, like they're weighing every sentence before it leaves their mouth. You understand, you would probably do the same. That doesn't make it easier to sit across from. Part 3. The world outside. The lawsuit starts 6 months in. A former colleague claims you verbally promised him a stake in something. A woman in Minnesota says you made a commitment at an event you have no record of attending. An LLC you've never heard of claims intellectual property ownership of a concept loosely related to your investment strategy. Most are incoherent. Your legal team uses the word frivolous, the way other people use filler words, but each one costs hundreds of thousands of dollars to dispute. Each one puts your name in a headline. Your lawyers tell you the math plainly. Settling costs less than fighting, even when you're right. So you settle some, and every settlement generates 5 more filings. Your annual legal budget crosses $35 million. You have an entire floor of a law firm dedicated to your affairs. Weekly summaries arrive. Pages and pages of people willing to lie under oath for access to a fraction of what you have. You read them the way you used to grade papers. Methodically, without feeling much. Her name is Elena. She teaches architecture at Berkeley, drives a 12-year-old Volvo, has opinions about everything, and she does not mention your money once, in the first 3 conversations. You meet at a dinner you almost didn't attend. You talk for 2 hours about things that have nothing to do with your net worth. It feels like something you haven't felt in months, the sensation of being in a room without everyone calculating what you're worth to them. You see her again, and again. 6 weeks in, something real is forming. Then you notice the small things. She mentions your pilot's name, in a conversation you never had with her. She knows which car you prefer in the city. Small pieces of research. Nothing alarming on its own, but assembled together, they tell you something. She knew exactly who you were before the night you met. You sit with this for a week. Maybe it's nothing. Everyone Googles. That's just normal now. But the question, once it forms, doesn't unform. It sits behind every dinner. Behind every moment she laughs at something you said. Was that real, or is that also something she prepared? You don't ask. You stop calling. She texts twice, then she stops too. 3 weeks later, a tabloid runs the photos, the restaurant, her leaving your property. A source described as close to the couple, she never spoke to anyone. You know this. But her name is out now. Her face, her workplace, the street she lives on. Strangers are flooding her accounts. Some of the messages are threatening. She had a private life before she sat across from you at that dinner. Ordinary, anonymous, hers, and you erased it just by being in the same room. Your PR team drafts a statement. Your lawyers send letters. None of it puts her name back where it was. You send her a message, an apology. She reads it. She doesn't respond. Pot 4, the family. Your mother calls on a Sunday morning. Her voice is the same as it always was. She asks if you're eating. She tells you about a bird that keeps landing on her back fence. For 10 minutes, your shoulders drop and your jaw unclenches, and you almost forget what your life has become. Then she mentions your brother. He would never ask her to call. That's not who he is. But his mortgage is behind. His truck needs work he can't afford. And you have more money than most countries. You wire him $3 million that afternoon. He doesn't call to say thank you. 3 months later, at a family holiday dinner you flew everyone to, on the Boeing 747, he sits at the far end of the table and speaks to cousins, to aunts, to anyone except you. When you try to catch his eye, he looks at his plate. He leaves before dessert. Without saying goodbye. The following week, your mother calls again. Different voice this time. She tells you your brother said, to a cousin, that the money broke the family, that everything changed when it came. She's not taking sides. She says this because she doesn't know what else to do. She has a security detail she never asked for, one son who won't speak to the other. A family that used to fit around a kitchen table and now requires a private aircraft and a catering staff to be in the same room. You tell her you'll talk to him. You don't. What would you say? You can't take back the wire transfer. You can't show up at his door without 2 armed men at the curb. The distance between your lives is not something a conversation can cross, so you stop trying, and the silence sets, the way silence does. Not with a moment, just with time passing and nothing filling it. Part 5, 3 a.m. Someone on the household staff has been selling information to a gossip outlet. Nothing dangerous, scheduled details, interior photos, but consistent. Paid. Ongoing. They traced it through metadata on a leaked photograph. The angle matched a specific window in the east corridor. 3 staff members had access. They narrowed it to 1 in 48 hours. Her name is Diane. She's been with the property since the first month. Thursday morning, a man in a suit walks her out. She carries a single cardboard box. She doesn't look up at the windows. He opens the gate. A car is waiting. The gate closes. You watch from the second floor until the car disappears. By Friday, there will be someone new. You take the yacht out for a week. Mediterranean. The water is the color of something from a screensaver. Dinner is prepared by a chef who spent 12 years in Michelin-starred kitchens. The table is set for 1. You sail back. You sleep poorly. At 3 a.m., you get up and walk the property. The house is silent. Somewhere, a machine hums. A security camera at the end of the corridor tracks your movement. You stop, it stops. You step left, it follows. You go outside. The grass is wet. The cold comes up through your feet. You walk to the middle of the lawn, and you stop. The sky is the same sky. That's the thing. It's exactly the same sky you used to look at from the roof of your apartment building in Portland. When the rent was 2 weeks late and you didn't care because it was summer and the stars were out. Same depth. Same silence. Same indifference to everything happening beneath it. You stand there until the cold reaches your bones. Then you go back inside. You fly home from a week in Japan. Your assistant meets you on the tarmac. She asks how the trip was. Wonderful, you say, back through the gate, past the guardhouse, past the pool you've used twice, past the tennis court you haven't touched, down the main corridor where the cameras adjust as you walk, past the wine cellar with bottles worth more than most people's monthly rent, into the office. 7 screens, your portfolio, your companies, your calendar. A news ticker that mentions your name twice in the first 30 seconds. You sit down. Outside, the security shift is changing. New faces replacing old ones. The groundskeeper takes the riding mower across the lawn in long, straight passes. 61 people work here. You are the only one who lives here.